let's get this party started. Sorry if you see me look down. If you weren't here last time, by the way, I'm Taea, or Twulfs, and I draw pictures. Brief introduction, because I spent too long on it last time.
That's amazing. I draw pictures. That's so cool.
That's the gist of it. So we're going to be going over value, light, and shadow, because they all kind of go together. And basically, the reason you want to know this is because if you have proper value techniques, then the illusion of depth in your artworks or panels or whatever you're working on will be a lot more realistic, I guess is a good word. Like, even if you don't do realism, it'll like show that these things have form. You can kind of see it here with these ones I painted. Even when you zoom out, you can tell that they have form and depth, and they're like objects that are real. So basically, value can be summed up to like a 10 scale. Well, this one only has 9, but like 9 or 10. And it starts with like 100%, which is the white, and goes all the way to, I guess, 90, which or 0, which is the darkest dark. We've all seen the value scale. Hopefully, it's pretty basic. But you can use this. I always keep one on me. I have like a little card scale thing because I will, like when I use the slider, I always muddy them up too much. So if I'm doing like a value study, I always try to keep something like this on me because it helps me simplify things even more. Here's a ball I drew. We've also all seen the ball. We're going to go through 5 modeling factors, which is basically a fancy term for like the names of the parts of light and shadow. We're only going to go through 5 of them because there's like 12 or 13, and they get really niche and like specific, and we don't need to learn all that for a crash course. If you want to learn more about it, you can always DM me and I can tell you all about it. So the first one we're going to look at is the form light, which is basically anything. You can see it in the circle. Oh my gosh, my 3 million layers. You can see it in the circle. It's everything that the light is facing the light. So anything that is lit on like a form or object is called the form light. And then the highlight is separate. And it's basically a reflection of the light source. So like wherever your light is coming from, if you have a shiny material, you will have a highlight, which is like the actual reflection of that light on your form. And it kind of, you won't always have a highlight. Like if you have a surface that is like matte, like some kind of fabric or something, you might not have a highlight. But if you have something really shiny like metal, your highlight will be really sharp and clear. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're rendering. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum in the shadow family, we have the form shadow. It's really funny because the names are like so basic, like form light, form shadow. It's pretty self-explanatory, but this is anything that is in shadow on your object or form. It's basically the opposite of the one we just looked at. This is when it starts to get weird. The terminator is the separation line between the light and shadow families. So you can see it here. It's like where it switches over and the form changes planes. I guess. Yeah, it like changes planes so the shadows change. And this is often confused with the core shadow, which you can also see in this picture. I'll show it to you. So this right here, oh my god, let me change brushes. Actually, that's fine. This little part right here where it gets darker is the core shadow. And the core shadow is a product of reflected light from the environment. So if you have an object and there is no reflected light on the ground, like if this surface was just totally black and there was like no light at all, you wouldn't see it and this would all just be in shadow. People confuse them a lot because they're kind of in the same spot. Like the core shadow is where it darkens along the terminator, but the terminator is the actual like dividing line itself. And then another one that has like 2 little parts that people confuse. The cast shadow is the result of like a projection. Sorry, I didn't open all my layers. I forgot that when you do this, it doesn't let you like touch things if you're not on a certain layer. But when we look at the cast shadow, you can tell like if the light source was coming from up here, which it is, the cast shadow falls under where the light is projected. So it will follow like the shape of your object. And people often confuse the cast shadow with like the occlusion shadow or the ambient occlusion. You can't really see it here. I'll make it for you. I'll make it real, even though it won't really make sense with the lighting here. A beautiful grayscale. So if we had something more like this, where you could see the cast shadow and then the really dark part that's right underneath, right here, this is the ambient occlusion. And that is a result of like light not being able to reach that surface at all. So it's just totally dark. And then another huge thing is values in context of each other. So we've probably all seen these little optical illusion thingies where like you look at this and you're like, oh, okay, this side is dark or lighter and this side is darker. But in reality, they're the same value. So if we take it, oops, sorry, I'm using a really weird brush right now to outline things. Let me get something normal. Right? So if we have this and we take it, no way. To the other side, you can tell that they're the same, even though they look different. And that's because when we put these next to each other, the background or like the surrounding values will affect the way we see this, even though they're exactly the same. So if you have like a value number like 5, like somewhere in the middle, if you have that on a darker background or surrounded by darker values, it will appear lighter than if it was on a lighter or like white background. That's also something to keep in mind because when we're painting and we know this, we can like use it to push the illusion further. So if you have like a form and you want it to pop out a bit more, you can use a darker or lighter color to push that further. We've probably all seen these too, they're so funny. But it's the same principle basically. Like if you look at these, this top one looks way darker than the one down here, even though they're exactly the same. We could do it again. Exactly the same. This is like the lowest quality picture ever. I couldn't find a normal one. But you can see it. They're exactly the same. And it appears that way because we have the black and the white right here that makes them look different. Same with these. This is such a classic. They look different, but they're the same. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like if you really understand this and like it's kind of confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, then you can like utilize that to push the illusion that you want further. So now we're getting into exercises. I don't know if anyone's heard of these before, but these kind of changed my life. This is called a notan study. And it's basically a study where you take just the light and the shadow family and you pick out the major groupings. So you're learning to train your eye to like be able to pick out the big light and shadow shapes so that you can create clear compositions or value structures. These are some I did when I was mentoring under Tiffany Mang, who is a great landscape painter. She also works for Marvel. I think she does color keys for them right now. She had us do so many of these. It's like drilled into my brain. If you've never tried it, I would recommend doing either master studies like these, because they're called masters for a reason, right? Like you have to learn from the best. Or you can just take photos outside or like set up a still life if you want and use that as well. Yeah. and I'll share this document. So if you're like trying to follow along and you're like, oh my god, this is so many new things and like it's crazy, don't worry. I'm gonna demo some for you guys so you can kind of see like how it works. The best way to do it is with a brush that has like no opacity whatsoever, because we're not worried about small details or like anything like that. We just want to create like the biggest shapes we can from these paintings. I like to use a flat brush. Sorry, I have like 300 brushes. You can start them with a white background and do the darks, or start with a dark background and do the lights, which is the way I do it, just because it makes more sense in my brain to pick out the light chunks than like the other way around. But honestly, the way you do it is up to you. So like if I was, sometimes I use the select tool too, because it's just easier. And these should be thumbnail size. Like you don't want to do, like you can tell, mine are kind of big because I wanted the examples to be clear. But ideally when you're doing this, they're pretty small and they're pretty fast, because you don't want to spend like 20 hours like zooming in and being like, oh, I need like all the little details in the hair. We don't need that. We don't need all that. So this is what I would do. Like I'm noticing this shape and I would just cut out all of this. It's kind of weird at first. And also this isn't like heavy on like proportions and like having it be totally accurate. You just want to have like the general shapes. And these are also kind of based on your perception, so there's not like a specific way they have to turn out. It's just the way you are thinking about breaking down the image. So like if you do these and you're like, oh, this looks so wrong, it probably isn't. As long as you have like a clear image, you're good to go. I also don't know, do we want to do all of these? I have like 6, I think. But I don't know if we'll need all of them. Like if you guys want to just do like 3, let me know, because I have a couple other demos that I'm going to do, and I don't know if we're gonna get to all of them. I like planned it out and I was like, maybe this is too much. That's why we breezed through the definitions. Like basically, this is what I would do. When I did these in Tiffany's class, it was like so eye-opening, because I used to be someone who like really had muddy values and I wasn't thinking in like big shapes. And now that's like all I think about. But you can kind of see how like quick it goes. Even that, like that was way too much. This is why I like to have the little scale on the side, because I always want to go for the color wheel. I'm like, I don't need that. And if you've never tried it with the select tool, fun. The select tool seems scary at first, but once you start doing it, it's not that bad. And if you guys have any questions or anything too, you can put them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it, but I'm really bad at paying attention to like 2 things at once. So Tony, if you catch questions, yeah.
I'll raise the questions if they come up. Don't worry.
I felt so bad the last time because you couldn't talk, and I felt like I was missing so many things.
There were a couple of questions, but I think you caught them all. It was just very unfortunate the whole Discord. I do not recognize your audio settings. Thanks, Discord.
Appreciate it. It's kind of funny. Not for you, but
yeah, definitely not for me. That was terrible.
Looking back, it was kind of funny. Cause like, isn't that perfect? Technical difficulties on the first session.
Always been like that.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, this is probably where I would stop this one. For both the teacher, what is in the chat? LOL. Okay. Sorry. This is probably where I would stop this one. Like, you could clean it up more, but like, we get the idea. Because if you really look at this, it's a pretty dark image. Just shape these a little better. And then when you zoom out, you can see that we have like the basic chunks. If you really wanted to get into it, maybe you could do something here, but I think that would be too much. Is there anyone, okay, do you guys like any of these better than the other ones or like want to see them more? I've done so many of these, I can do any of them.
I think
Or
it would be great to do the canyon and maybe the ladies in the corner.
the ladies at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll start there, and if we want to do more, we can. Everyone likes the canyon and the dresses. I really liked the boat and the trees, but it doesn't matter. By the way, this was Rembrandt. This is Edgar Payne. If you guys need a list of like masters, I can send them to you. And this was Monet, I think. Maybe that's not right. Actually, that doesn't sound right. Maybe it was Degas. I don't remember, but I remember the first two. So for this one, I'm immediately just like walk you through what I'm seeing. This, to me, immediately. That's a good way to do it too, if you like trace over and then you like try to recreate it on the other side. Stuff, we can fix it later. And then after that, this is like the next thing. That was really bad. That jumps out to me, right? Like those to me look like the two biggest light planes. Why I love the select tool because I'm so bad at drawing straight lines. So I can just select it and it's like always perfectly straight. But then I always have to tweak it. The Procreate select tool is really weird. And I have really bad aim. Like you're supposed to connect it back to the dot, but I always miss somehow, so then it gets weird. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Some people do these like once you've gotten the hang of like doing it with 2 values. Some people like to do them with 3. I wouldn't do any more than 3 because then it gets too convoluted. But some people like to add like a midtone for more definition. Like if we wanted to get this spot, we could add a 3rd value. But really, we should be focusing at first on simplifying the big chunks. Like to me, this I think stands out. And then like little things like this, you could add them, but personally, I would ignore them because to me, they're not significant enough to affect, like, once you zoom out, they don't affect the overall hierarchy of values.
It's a small question from Zodiac.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Sorry if you see me turn my canvas like 100 times.
Do you have J.C. Leyendeckers? Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Art for this study.
I don't have Leyendecker in here, but great artist to study if you are like, if you struggle with brush economy, which is like how you lay down your brush strokes. He's a great artist to study because his brushstrokes are so clear and defined and like really follow the form of like whatever. We looked at him when we looked at clothes. So like if he was gonna paint my giant sleeve, it would be like strokes going down. Great artist, classic illustrator. But no, I don't have any for here. I only grabbed these ones, and then I have the rest are photos from Unsplash.
Great question, Zodiac.
And great artists to bring up. I love Leyendecker. You see a lot of people on Twitter will take like his paintings and recreate them with like their OCs or something. It's really cute. I do a lot of zooming in and out. This is like when you're painting traditionally, that's like the equivalent of like standing up and walking away from your painting or like standing back a couple steps so that you can like squint and see like the huge shapes better. So usually when I'm working, I always keep the like little reference window open and I make it really small. Oh my god, it's upside down. I don't know why it does that. But like this, like I always have my color palette and I always have my like tiny little view window open so that I don't have to keep zooming in and out and I just like glance at it. Like I can already tell now just by looking at it. This piece right here is like weird looking. I used to never do it because I think at first Procreate didn't have the view window and it was like my biggest pet peeve because I needed it so bad. If you wanted, you could add the little horses, the little cowboys. Look how cute they are. And like this is what I mean by they don't have to be detailed because like these are just blobs. Now the ladies. I feel so bad that I don't remember what artist this is. I would take a minute to look at it too because I have to like observe and like really get into it. Like to me, the first shape that jumps out is this umbrella. This is also, you don't see me sketching in these. I just don't do it. I don't think it's necessary because they're so small and it's so easy to correct them. I wouldn't recommend any sort of sketching if you do these because it will just get too confusing.
I have done a quick Google search, and it seems to be Joaquin Sorolla, a Spanish painter.
I was
Uh,
way off. Oh my gosh. Awful guesses.
the painting is called Women Walking on the Beach, and it was painted in 1909.
Well, it's beautiful.
This one, when compared to the original, this one has been, let's say, adjusted for contrast.
Is it?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I pulled these from Google. And then I think some of them were leftovers from Tiffany's class because she would send us like folders worths of like artists and paintings to study. Like to me, the hat is a big one. That's way too big. This is how I sketch when I do these. I just start off really messy. Like this is a big piece to me. And like this. Because you can always go back in and paint over it to like tighten it up. That's just how my brain works. The ones with people always take so much longer than just the landscapes. Like I'm really glad you guys didn't pick this one. We could have done it, but like I picked it out and I was like, yeah, that's gonna be a tough one. This is a great example to see how like blobby it is though. When we're thinking about values, we're never thinking about lines because that doesn't exist in the real world. Like when you look at an object, you don't see the line art. When you're drawing, like if that's your art style, that's totally fine. But when we're doing like studies like this, we don't want to be thinking about lines and like outlining things. It's hard to grasp at first, but once you get used to it, it's kind of fun. Especially if you're really used to line art. Sometimes when you do these though, if you like want to separate pieces like that, you can like maybe get away with it like with this part of the umbrella. But sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. So you kind of have to play around and like see what makes the most sense. And that's what makes it a study because you're like taking these in and like learning about how these master painters are grouping their values. Like you could maybe do this part of the umbrella. This little part right here. Honestly, I don't think we need it. Like if you look at the view window, to me that looks weird and makes it a little more confusing to look at. Sorry, I'm a bad multitasker. I'm bad at drawing and talking at the same time because I get really focused and then my face gets really red and I start sweating. I don't know why. I'm like these two little pieces now. The ones with people are like you can get away with doing more of the details because otherwise they don't look like anything. Like, where's one I did? Like these, you can see these like tiny little pieces like in the face, in the shoulder, really help make it look like a figure from far away. But like in the landscape ones, it's like pretty simple. So you kind of have to judge it or like play it by ear. And then you can see I do these on one layer. Some people like to do it on like two layers, like have the background and then like whatever color you're filling in so that you can like move elements around. But since I'm not really worried about like getting perfect proportions and like all of that, I just kind of wing it and then clean it up as I go. There's like so many folds here. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now. What time is it? I don't want to spend forever on these. I feel like that's pretty good for the allotted time period. So you can see they're really quick. Like I don't know how long that was, like 10 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Ideally when you do them, yeah. Ideally when you do them, don't sit down and do them all like this because it's just bad practice. Like if you want to do these, I would maybe take like 10 to 15 paintings from either masters or anyone whose art you want to study and then do like one a day as like a warm up or something. So then these are actual value studies and not no-tan studies. These are basically just good practice. Like, because you're taking a picture and then you're trying to see the values instead of like the colors. And this is super important because if you don't have proper value knowledge or like understanding, then you won't be able to accurately create or like use color effectively. Because they're very intertwined since every color has its own value. If you don't like understand or can't see the like little differences, it's going to get really weird really fast and you'll end up with really muddy colors. These were the images from Unsplash. If you're ever looking for free references, that is a great place to go because you can set it to the free license and then you don't have to worry about being like sued. Which is what I always do because they have awesome still lives. Like, this is so cute. I was trying to do like a Valentine's Day theme because it's coming up. So I did a bunch of flowers. But yeah, you can also see for these, I would do them not this big. I don't think you have to do them this big. But you can tell, like, when you zoom in, it's not detailed like at all because we're not worried about having like a super perfectly accurate painting. We just want to see the major values and how they're like working together. So this is a good example. I need a brush that I can circle things with. This is fine. We'll do them in red. Actually, we'll do them in pink for Valentine's Day. This is a good example here of like the value relationships. I'll zoom in on here so I don't have to see that. We can still see the whole thing. But like you can see, obviously, this is all most likely one value, or you can simplify to one value. But since these are so dark, you can put in like a little bit of light to make it stand out more. And then when you zoom out, it clarifies the form really well. So that was the first one I did. I was trying to find, because when you think about value studies for master paintings, some of them are like high key or low key paintings, which is the fancy way to say that like it's either mostly light values or mostly dark values. This one was right in the middle. Like these are mostly midtones. But then I grabbed this one because I would consider this a high key painting. So it's like mostly the first 5 or like 6 values on like the 10 value scale. So it's like the same thing. You kind of just look at the colors and do your best to pick out what value it is. If you are new to this, I'll show you a secret. You can take, like, you can fill the canvas black and then put your layer to the color setting, and it will, oh, I did pretty good. I did check these. I kind of just did them because I've been doing this for so long that I can just eyeball it and it's pretty close. Like maybe my bottle is a little too dark, like right in here. But this is a good way to check like that your values are pretty decent. Like when I'm painting something, I always have this sort of layer that I can turn on and off if I'm like at a point where I'm like, this looks so weird and I can't figure out why. I'll check my values to make sure everything is reading properly. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that's so accurate. Nice. So yeah, that's a little cheat sheet that you can do, and it helps a lot. Even it's not cheating, so don't worry. Just do it if you need it. This is more of a low-key painting, so it's like basically all of it is dark. So yeah, I wanted to throw a couple in there so that you could like see the range. But yeah, Unsplash, great image finder. Especially if you're like, if you want to do this and you're like, oh, I don't know what to paint, you can go on Unsplash and just look up still life photography, and there'll be like 3 million. So yeah. Now we're gonna do some all flowers. I have 2 of them. I don't think we'll have time for me to do both. So do you guys like this flower better or this flower? We can do the dark flower or the light flower, or I guess the medium flower. This isn't even a flower either. That's like cotton.
I think cotton looks pretty good.
Everyone likes the dark one. That's so funny.
Yeah, everyone's gone cotton.
Okay. When I do these, it's not as strict as like the Notan study. Like I usually use one brush. I was using this one when I did the other ones. I always make, there's my check layer. I always make a clipping mask. Oops. And then I just paint on top so that I don't go outside my square. Personally, I like to start with the darkest shapes first. So like I'm looking at this and I just fill it in because we're gonna fix it later. These, you can sketch with these because sometimes you just need it. Like I always roughly, it's very similar to the process of like traditional oil painting where you like, I'll do it for you. Oh, hold on, I'll demo it. We'll just start over. Like I always try to match my proportions. Because when you sketch in oil paint, it has to be like, well, it doesn't have to be, but the way I learned is a really simple, like that's too tall. That's why I like to keep my pictures like next to each other, because you can kind of see it should be, the top of the bottle should be like somewhere around here. And if you're doing this traditionally, it's like the thing you do with your pencil where you like actually measure it. But I'm actually really bad at that. I tend to eyeball a lot of things and then fix them during the actual like painting process, just because it works out better for me. But you can see how like messy it is. This is how I would rough this in. And I'm always looking at pieces in relation to each other. So like this mirror part, I'm noticing that the edge of it touches the little cotton ball. So I use that for my proportions. And with like this little, the little ornamentation that's like right here, it's like just barely above. It's actually pretty good. I tend to draw things too big. Like in my oil painting class, my stuff would always go off the paper because I was drawing it too big. That was pretty decent for me. That's why I love digital art, because then you can just like resize it. But I feel like that's close enough. And then I just go in and I do all of the darks. This is actually how I was taught to do traditional oil painting too, is to lay in all of your shadows first before you do anything else. Because it just like helps lay down the foundation better. And it kind of blew my mind when I learned that, because I used to just wing it. And I was like, why is everything turning out ugly? That was why. So this is where it's handy to have like the little set of like color palette of values, because then like when you do it like this way or like with the color wheel, which don't do value studies with the color wheel because you can't really get clean grays. But like when you use this, it's just way too many options and it gets overwhelming really fast. If you want to make one of these, the easiest way, here, I'll make it bigger so you can actually see it. Or maybe you can't. I guess it has to be tiny. There we go. The easiest way to do it is to do like RGB sliders, and then you just go to the value one. You don't have to touch any of these, it doesn't matter, as long as the saturation is all the way down. You just do this, and then you can just do like 10, 20, and then like grab them all the way to 100, and that will give you the 10 like set that you need. I have one that has like way more. I wonder if I could show it to you. This one. I have one that's like a full-blown like set of them. I don't remember what increments I used. Maybe it was 5, like 5% each. But if you're getting used to this and you're just starting out, you don't need all that. So then after I have most of my darks, I'll just go through and like try to match these like that. Looks maybe a little too bright. And just fill in more shapes. It's really messy. And then we always have our little window so we can see if it looks decent. Like that looks too dark to me. But that kind of looks too light. But it'll work for now. Oh wow, that's like the exact color. And you can like tell that when I'm doing this, I'm not like filling things in like with like layers or anything, or like going under the sketch. I'm painting right on top of it. Actually, I think it's the same layer because I sketched it. And I just paint around it because this is how I would approach it. I approach a lot of these studies the way I would if I was like actually painting in the studio, because to me it just makes more sense. So that's why I just ignore layers and I just go for it. The worst that could happen is you just have to paint over it. Something like that. And then if you were like doing this and you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what to do, like I'm stuck now, that's when you can like use, that is pretty cool. Wow. I didn't realize I was this good at this. But like you can see, they're fairly accurate just from eyeballing it. And it's kind of like a thing, like once you do it more, you'll get used to it and you'll be able to do it like super easily. I have such a bad memory. I always forget which color I have. I don't like to color pick when I do this either, because then you'll get like the weird in-betweens. So I always try to go back to my little, what's it called, color palette. You can see how simple it is. Like I just drew those and they're literally just blobs. Can you guys hear my iPad? I feel like it's so loud. Like I'm like tapping it. It sounds so loud to me. This is kind of the thing I was talking about earlier with Decker paintings. Like when he does his brushstrokes, he follows the form of it, which helps a lot. You can kind of see it in these ones that I did too. Like the fabric, like it's going that way to follow the grain of whatever kind of cloth that is. It looks kind of like burlap. Like same with like the leaves, like they're all going in different directions to sort of follow the way the shadows are, like this right here. I always try to keep it in mind. I used to just scribble. I used to be a scribbler. And then I learned about brush economy, and that kind of changed my life. So then once you have your like major groups, then it's kind of just detailing. Like if we look at the little window, my mirror looks too skinny. Now it looks too big. Oh my god, see, I always want to color pick. Did you see that? Such a bad habit. This right here, this little corner, is a good example too of like the values in relation to each other, because I'm gonna make this, you can kind of see the shadow anyway, but I'm gonna make it a little darker. Okay, too dark. So that when I go to paint in this, it will pop out more from the wall. And then same with like right over here. This little shadow right here. In conjunction with like the reflection in the mirror. And you can tell when I do this, I don't pick them all right on the first try. Like I'll lay it down and I'll be like, okay, that's way too bright. And I'll just click through them all until it looks close enough. So it's not like I'm a genius and I get it right on the first try. You have to like get into it and think about it. And then it just becomes about cleaning it up. The fun part to me. Like I love doing these flowers because there's so many weird shapes with like the stems. I have a bad habit of rotating the canvas. I'm trying not to so that you can actually see what's happening. But when I like actually paint things, I'm like always flipping it all around. Which is also another way. It's the same as like when you step back and like zoom out. It's kind of just the same thing where you like look at it from a new perspective. Like sometimes if you're painting something and you're like, this looks so weird, you can actually paint it upside down and it will help you pick out the shapes better. Like I'm already noticing that my flowers look crazy because you're not thinking about it as like, okay, this is a little flower pot with cotton in it. You're just seeing the shapes. Like mine is so wide. The beauty of painting because you can just change things when they don't look right. These, you can tell they take longer than the Notan studies. If you want to try them, I would try to do them within like an hour or two. Anything more than that is not worth it, and you should just start a new one. Because that's when, then it gets like too confusing. It's like, okay, this didn't work out. So it's always better, in my opinion, to just start over instead of trying to fix something that isn't working. How are we doing on time? Oh my gosh, 1 minute? Too much rambling. See, like, this is kind of what I mean. My thingies My little cotton balls are like so crazy looking, so I'm just gonna totally paint over it and then go through and fix it. Oops. Like that. It's crazy looking. And sometimes I just grab things and slightly move them. You can just fill in whatever you moved. When was this supposed to end? Was this supposed to end at 3? That's my bad.
It's okay.
Can't rush the process.
If anyone needs to leave, they can.
I mean, yeah, the rest of it is just demoing, so.
Yeah, and we can
if
continue
you need to leave.
And we'll put it on YouTube, and then people can watch the recording.
Exactly. But I probably won't finish this because I don't know how long this would take me to finish. We'll get through the major chunks. I probably am not gonna refine it, or if I do, I'll send it later. Just because I'm going to share this document and it already has these finished ones. So if you want to look at them to study or like to see how I'm breaking down the shapes, you'll have these ones that are actually finished. But you can kind of see here. Wait, let's check our values. So I'm noticing like when I look at this, that like, oops. Right? This is why it's helpful to check because I'm noticing like this portion back here can kind of all come this way. And like down here too. And then I also just noticed that that can be darker. So it's just helpful to have on the side, especially if you're doing a study, because like you want to learn while you're doing it. So if you just blind guess and you like don't take anything away from it, then you didn't really learn. But if you have like the grayscale as a resource, then you can see like what am I not picking up or like what's not clicking for me, and then like figure out why. Like if I kept making the background too dark, then I could look at it and say, okay, I need to make that lighter and like notice that. It's all about observing. That's like an underrated skill. And the best way to train your seeing skill is to do those no-tan studies. It's like one right here. This is what I like to do too, is I'll just block in the whole shape. This one right here. And I can see it's kind of connected to this. I'll just block in the whole thing and then I'll go back in with the light chunks. It just like makes more sense to me. I think in terms of carving out lighting instead of putting in shadows. I don't know where I picked that up from either. Maybe that's an oil painting thing. Except it can't be, because you lay in the shadows first. Yeah, I don't know. Everyone's different. Sorry, sometimes I just have to look at it. It helps to have it on like my computer screen too, because when I stare at my iPad for too long, I feel like I miss things. You can also tell I don't do any blending when I do this. I do it all like with the painting. And that's mostly because Procreate Smudge Tool is awful, but also because it helps you learn more because you learn to lay down intentional like colors or brushstrokes instead of just throwing things at the wall until it sticks. Because it's always important to know why you're laying down strokes. Like if you're just painting things and scribbling and you don't know why you're doing it, then you're not going to learn anything. So you should be thinking about what you're painting while you're painting it, if that makes sense. Like right here, I'm thinking about this shape that you can like kind of see, but it's not very noticeable. So I would probably do something like that. This reflection is kind of killing me. But this is what it's all about, is like figuring it out and working through it. Any questions? I feel like I'm just painting. I could try to talk and paint at the same time.
I think a common question that probably comes up often is how does this help comic creators, right? What like obviously I have my own idea on that, but what do you think? Like how does that
This
help
is
them?
good to learn. Yeah, this is good to learn and study because if you're setting up a panel and you're like trying to create a scene that's clear, if you have like values that are all the same, or like even if you're using colors that are like if you have the sky be blue and the grass be green and they're very similar in value, when you zoom out or look at that panel and it's like this big on like a computer screen or printed out, it's not going to read as like clearly as it could if you understood the values and you like know to separate them and keep your light and shadows clear. Because when you have like a clear separation between the light and the shadow, then your forms will read more accurately. Like even at this size, you can see that there's like a bottle there.
Hmm.
It's
So
like that kind of thing. It adds to the
yeah,
three-dimensionality and
yeah,
like clarity of an image.
adds depth to the paneling and the story. Essentially, makes it
Yeah,
clearer
and
and
like
more engaging.
clarity,
Yeah.
especially with the no-tan studies. I don't know where they are in here. Like if you have a panel and you're like thumbnailing, you can do it in like all black and white and you'll be able to tell like are my silhouettes clear enough that like when I actually do this, it's going to look like something instead of just like random stuff.
Yeah. Adds
And then it
clarity
goes
and
back to
engagement.
thinking, yeah, it goes back to thinking intentionally too about how you're framing scenes because different like framing and like silhouettes can add to like a different vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets into color too. We'll get into that next time because they're super connected. That's when it starts to get into color theory and it starts to get confusing. But don't worry, I'll teach you. Did you see that? Look at my layer. You can see all the marks that I made when I was like circling things, but you can't see it because it's a clipping mask.
Young Zodiac, we can always do better. That's life is
That's
full of that.
true.
Life is full of that. Don't beat yourself up. I think you learn and you apply it and so it goes.
And also, you can't get it right on the first try. So you kind of have to, it's a lot of trial and error. Like, this took me a long time to learn. I think I started doing these in like high school, and I've graduated college. So I've been doing this for a long time. I always try to check mine. And I always zoom out when I do. Like, you can see this piece is way too bright. But yeah, basically it's all about visual clarity. You don't want to have any visual noise because then you just have a messy image or panel or whatever you're working on. And I don't know if anyone has noticed, but I haven't touched any of these like lighter values because this is more of a low key reference. Like most of these are the latter like 5 values. Like we barely use that one. And it's goes to show that like the value relationships are important because even though we don't have the full value range in this painting, it still reads as like this object is lighter than whatever's happening in the background because next to the darker ones they look lighter.
Mm. And as always, if you wanted to double check yourself later, you can always change the layer to a color and
The layer, yeah. Yeah, technically the color layer setting isn't like totally accurate to what the grayscale would look like, but for something like this, it's close enough to where you don't have to worry about that. I don't remember where I learned that. I learned it somewhere that like the color mode layer cheat isn't like actually what the grayscale would look like.
and there's always it always depends on what the color um what I can't quite remember what the specific term for that is. That different programs will use different color settings.
Oh yeah. Like I think mine is P3, which is some sort of display setting. Like there's like the RGB and like CMYK.
Like Adobe with Photoshop will have its own kind of set of
Yeah.
color tones or color
Color
schemes or something like
settings.
that. Yeah, and you can always change them. You can go like even sRGB has different settings or different
Yeah.
setups depending on which program you're using. Adobe has their own, and
Yeah, it's
Apple
really
has their own.
weird.
And
Like, where is it? In here. You can see it. There's like all the color profiles. Mine is P3,
yeah,
but then it has them that you can switch to.
yeah, there you go. Color profiles. That's what it's
Don't
called.
know don't know what like half of these mean. Like these are all RGB, but like the difference? Don't ask me. All you need to know is that RGB is for screens and CMYK is for print. But even now, there are printers that print RGB, so it doesn't really matter.
I think they convert them on the fly to
Yeah.
CMYK. So
Back in the good old days, you had to do it yourself.
export TIFF files in
Yeah.
CMYK for printing.
I love TIFF files. I always did PSD files and then they'd be huge.
They're still huge.
Yeah.
Some things just never change.
I would say for the purposes of the demo, I don't want to keep anyone too long. I think for the purposes of the demo, we did it. We smashed it.
Yeah, that looks pretty good actually.
That's pretty accurate for like however long that was.
You probably spend
So
about
then just
20
to
minutes
close
there.
out, yeah, so it was something like that, I think, which is honestly a decent amount of time to spend on them. Like 30 minutes is like the ideal.
Good to know.
An hour is cutting it because that's a little long for just a study, but like 30 minutes to an hour is like the sweet spot. Anything more than that, just move on to the next one.
Pretty good warm up, I would say.
It is a great warm up. That and like especially with these like blocks, you can find like these like block still lives on like Pinterest or like Unsplash. Those are great because then you get your forms and your values.
Fantastic.
But yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can always message me. I answer like all of my DMs because I always see them. Or you can ping me on Discord.
Yeah, Discord. She's here on Discord. She is on Instagram.
Here,
She's on
I'm on
Twitter.
Twitter.
Are you on Blue Sky?
I'm also on other places. I'm on Blue Sky, but I don't check it as often. So you're better off hitting me on Twitter.
Instagram, Twitter.
I check it, just not as often.
Email occasionally.
If you email me, I will see it, and I will write you back. I check my art email frequently.
What we'll do is we'll put these on YouTube, and we'll also share the presentation, well, or the Procreate file, I guess. Like maybe we can export it.
No, I'll turn it into a PDF.
Oh, there you go. PDF.
That's what I did last time.
PDF, and you will be able to access that. Yeah, thanks so much for coming. We'll do the next one. It's gonna be
it's gonna be color.
It's gonna be color towards
color
the end
and light.
February, would you say, or are we looking
probably
at
or like beginning of March?
We're probably looking at early March for lesson 2.
Lesson 1, part 3.
Part 3. There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone that came over.
You guys are so sweet. Everyone's saying thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you all for coming. If there's any questions, as always, feel free. You can stick around for the other lessons. They are going to be 5 lessons, or essentially there's 5 parts.
I think
to this, so there's going to be another 3, and then we'll take essentially a bit of time for recess, and we'll have the other ones. We'll start again to the latter half of this year, essentially. So yeah,
I'm so excited. I can't wait to go to those. I can't wait to be in the audience.
But yeah, thanks so much everyone for coming. We'll share the recordings once they're ready, and alongside the PDF files. And see you on part 3.
Yeah, for color. If you want to learn about color, join us next time.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone. Class dismissed. I need like a little bell.
Ding 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 ding.
It's time for lunch or something.
Bye.